Welcome everyone to the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Congenital Heart Surgery Database monthly webinar. Today is Tuesday, November the 21st. So thank you to everyone that was able to join today. And for those that are not able to join, this will be recorded per usual and posted out on the STS website. So thanks everyone for joining today. On the call with me today from the panelist side, we have myself and Chastity and Leslie. We have Dr. Subramanian on the call. We have Emily and Melinda. So thanks everyone for joining today. For today's agenda, I'm just going to provide a super brief STS update, and then I'm going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie for our data manager education. They have some important information to cover, and then we'll finish things up via the Q&A. We will have some case scenarios and some polling today, so get ready to answer a few questions. So with that, let's go ahead and get things kicked off. Just a reminder, I'm going to go ahead and shut the chat box down. So just a friendly reminder to please put your questions into the Q&A. And if you'd like, you can use the raise hand function if you'd like to ask your question instead of typing it out, but just ensure that your microphone is enabled. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and kick things off. These updates will look very similar to the ones we had on our last call. So the STS updates, the November training manual and FAQ summary were posted at the beginning of the month. So that those are both available to you out on the STS website. The fall 23 harvest analysis is expected to be released in early December. We just completed our internal testing here over on the STS side. So we are expecting to hopefully have that report released in early December. Exact date will be coming soon, and I'll share that with you as soon as I have it. The 2024 harvest schedule is here and has also now been posted out on the STS website as well. So that information is available on the website for you at this time. AQO 2023, just a reminder, the content is now available for purchase. Sorry, this the slide is a little bit needs to be updated, but the content is now available for purchase. If you did not attend AQO and you would like to purchase content, it is available. I believe our marketing and communications team sent out an email earlier in the week regarding AQO content that is now available for purchase. Also, just a reminder to claim your continuing education credit. The deadline is Friday, December the 29th. So that is approaching here after the upcoming holidays. So if you need any assistance obtaining your credit, or if you have any questions, please reach out to Core Excel directly. They can be reached at learn@coreexcel.com. And then also we have the AQO Hot Topics webinar scheduled for December the 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. The agenda is, we have finalized that agenda, so we'll have some of the topics include, we will be bringing Diane and Angie back for the Hot Topics webinar. We'll have Chastity and Leslie presenting as well. They'll be presenting on 30-day follow-up, discharge to location that's not home. We'll have case scenarios. I think Jody is going to present a Ross case scenario, and we'll have some more information on an audit from a site that was most recently audited, get some information from their perspective as well. And also Dr. Subramanian will be kicking off our session with some updates regarding the CHSD database. All right, that is all that I have. Like I said, super brief updates from the STS side of things. So now I'm going to turn things over to Chastity and Leslie for our data manager education. So Chas, Leslie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Leanne. You can go to the next slide. So let's start with everybody take a nice deep breath for the information that is coming. It does represent a rather large change in the database. And so we're here to help you. We're here to explain what's going to happen and what to do moving forward. And we hope to make everything incredibly clear. Obviously, we would want you to submit any of your questions to the core group so that all of you continue to be successful in answering these questions within the congenital database. So today's discussion is going to focus on one topic only, and this is the count of prior operations. So you know these two fields, they have been historically in the database. And so there's number of prior cardiac operations in addition to number of prior CPB cardiac operations. These definitions are changing. Next slide. So why do we want to change these? Why are we changing these mid-version? We understand that this is probably not ideal to change something in the middle of a new version, but we're at the front end of this version, so we're hoping it presents an opportunity for people to move with this going forward. So what it's being felt by our task force and our surgeon leaders is that procedures that have had a prior sternotomy, that risk is not being adequately captured in our current count. So for example, a patient that perhaps had previously been implanted with a ventricular assist device, that chest has been opened, that VAD had been placed, perhaps they recover and go on their merry way, but come back later and undergo that heart transplant. You know, in the current count, your prior number of cardiac operations would be 0 based on the op type of the VAD, as well as your prior CPB operations were 0. And so we're not capturing the risk of this patient whose chest has been opened and a VAD being placed. So this is really the reason why we need to change the prior operation counts. Next slide. So looking at the number of prior cardiac operations, there are some things changing. We are going to include some specific VAD and ECMO procedures. You need to pay really close attention because it's not all VAD operations or ECMO procedures at all. So we'll look at adding prior procedure 2380, which is VAD implantation, but only where the op type of the procedure is VAD, either with or without CPB. And the incision type can be any of the incisions that we currently collect in the database, anything but other. So when you think about the incision type other, we know that we're coding this for, let's say, some type of peripheral incision, or if your sternum is open and we're doing a procedure. That would be incision type other. So that will all be excluded. This is really that you've done, say, a thoracotomy or a median sternotomy, and your op type is VAD. Likewise, for ECMO, the prior procedure has to be 2860 ECMO cannulation, where again, the op type is ECMO, and the incision type, again, is anything but other. So it does not, peripheral cannulations for ECMO will not count. All right, next slide. So this is what the training manual will read for number of prior cardiac operations. So it's going to say, indicate the number of surgical procedures performed prior to this procedure based on the criteria below. So if the patient had any prior surgery with op type 1 CPB cardiovascular, or any prior surgery with op type 2 no CPB cardiovascular, this is unchanged. This is what the current definition states. Here's where the change comes in. Any prior surgery where the procedure is 2380 VAD implant, if and only if the operation type is VAD with CPB or VAD without CPB, and the incision type is not other. And then we're also adding any prior surgery where the procedure is 2380 ECMO cannulation, if and only if the operation type is ECMO, and the incision type again is not other. Next slide. So when we look at the number of prior CPB cardiac operations, this is going to work differently. So we're really looking at adding any procedure where the operation type is VAD with CPB. Next slide. So the way the training manual will now read is indicate the number of surgical procedures performed prior to this procedure based on the criteria below. So in our historic definition, we will include any prior surgery with an operation type of CPB cardiovascular. And now we're going to add any prior surgery where the op type is 6, which is VAD with CPB. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about logistics. This is not going to start today or tomorrow. We are going to start this on kind of a clean date. So we thought January 1st of operations performed on January 1st of 2024 or after would be a good starting date for this. We are not going to go back and recode any previous operations. So all operations through December 31st of 2023, which isn't that long actually, we will not recode any of those. We're only looking at including these new VAD and ECMO cannulation and implant procedures starting on January 1, 2024. However, if a patient who had previous VAD and ECMO cannulations that meet this criteria now come back to your program and have surgery in January or after, you will need to go back and validate if they should have additional surgeries added into the January case. We're not going to go backwards and change anything prior. We're going to start in January. In order to include the ECMO and VAD cases, you must have documentation of the op type as well as the incision type to include these. So we can't make any assumption. So your op note needs to say that, the ECMO cannulation was done through a median sternotomy, through a thoracotomy, something like that, somewhere where you have documentation that you know that this wasn't a peripheral cannulation for ECMO or VAD. So if that makes sense. So next slide. Let's go through just a few examples, and then Leslie's going to really take us through some intricate case scenarios where we were trying to come to terms and understand this ourselves for our own data. So there is some audience polling opportunity with these next few questions, so get ready. So do the following count as prior cardiac operations based on the new definition that I just presented? An Impella device placed in the cath lab by interventional cardiology.
Yes, Leslie, can you see the poll as it's being answered?
I can.
Okay, all right, cool. Just let me know when you're ready for me to end it.
Looks like the numbers have almost stabilized. A few seconds.
Yep. Looks good.
Okay, that looks good. Okay, so it looks like 95% of you said no, and 5% of you said yes. So I will reveal the correct answer in the next slide. So the answer is actually no. So an Impella device placed in the cath lab by interventional cardiology is not a surgical procedure that would be put into our database, given it was done by interventional cardiology. Also, the incision type for this would be other because they're placing it via transcatheter. And so in this instance, the answer would be no, this would not count as a prior cardiac operation. Next slide. Next slide. Yep. So central cannulation for ECMO during the index operation. So again, we'll open polling.
Like this one might be a little more split down the middle.
A little tricky, isn't it?
Yep.
I agree. It is 50-50.
Yeah, it's straight up 50-50, yeah.
Okay, so let's explain this a little bit. So remember, a patient's coming into the OR to have a procedure done, so their index operation, and we're looking to count prior cardiac operations. So it would not count for that operation at hand. You can go to the next slide so the answer can be revealed. Okay. But remember, we're placing the patient on ECMO while it's during another procedure where their sternum is already open. So this will not count as a prior operation. Also, remember, to count central ECMO cannulation, the op type needs to be ECMO. So for an index operation, by definition, the op type cannot be ECMO. It would have to be op type 1 or 2 CPB cardiovascular or no CPB cardiovascular. Next slide. Berlin heart placement prior to transplant. Okay, looks like we're stabilizing.
Yep.
Okay, so go to the next slide. And the answer here is maybe. So, I mean, I guess everyone is right, whether you said yes or no, but you
Oh,
really need to know what the incision type and the operation type is for this Berlin heart, because perhaps the Berlin heart was placed during another procedure, in which case the op type was not bad. And so in which case it wouldn't count. However, if we knew that there was, say, a sternotomy incision and the op type was bad with or without CPB, then it would have counted. So this could go either way. I didn't give you enough information to answer it, so great job. Next.
and I didn't give you the option for maybe, so that's my fault.
Well,
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
fair. Okay. VAD implantation through an already open sternum where the op type is VAD with CPB. Would this count as a prior cardiac operation?
Like we've got another
About
close.
50-50.
Yeah.
Okay, so next slide so we can see the answer.
Yep.
All right, so the answer here is no, because remember, if you're doing a procedure where the sternum is already open, the incision type is other. So we are not going to count VAD implantation where our sternum is already open. I know this is tricky. I know it's going to take a while for all of us to understand this and move forward with it. But you're probably going to need to perhaps go back and listen to this webinar again. Maybe it's the kind of thing you print out and have, you know, taped to your desk with the 500 other Post-it notes that you have around your computer. But Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Or I think I have a summary slide. Let me.
Nope.
Oh, nope, case scenarios. You go right ahead, Leslie. Turn it over to you.
Think Leslie was having some audio issues, so
Hear you now. Can you hear me fine?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's start with a case scenario. If I go out, I'm gonna just jump in and I'll try to reconnect. But let's start with this one. Patient is admitted for a Norwood with planned delayed sternal closure. On post-op day 3, the chest is successfully closed without complication. On post-op day 7, the patient suffers a cardiac arrest and is centrally cannulated to ECMO. The patient decannulates a week later and the chest is closed again on post-op day 16. So this is just reviewing our current rules. Using the current definition, how many prior cardiac operations has this patient undergone? Looks like it's slowing down.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and
Go
go ahead and end it. And share results.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose
Hello?
you, Leslie? Are you there?
I can hear you.
Okay.
We
can
hear you.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. The current rules, we have 1 for the Norwood, 1 for the delayed sternal closure, and 1 for the second delayed sternal closure. So 3 is the correct answer. Next slide.
Uh-oh. I think you might have to jump in, Jess. Don't hear Leslie.
Okay. Leslie, if you come back, come back.
Back.
She's back.
What's happening? Patient is admitted for so this is the same patient admitted for the Norwood, planned delayed sternal closure. Then we close the chest, suffers cardiac arrest, centrally cannulated to ECMO, decannulates a week later, and the chest is closed again on post-op day 16. So now the patient has recovered, they've gone home, and they're coming back January 3rd for a Glenn. How many prior cardiac operations under the new rules has the patient undergone?
I'm trying to launch my poll. Hold on. It won't let me launch it for some reason. I don't know why.
My technical issues are being shared.
Yeah, it won't let me launch the poll. I don't know what's going on.
That's okay. If you want to skip to the next slide, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So in this one, with the new rules, because that chest was closed and we reopened it for a cannulation, a central cannulation, we're going to add that in. So we have the Norwood, the ECMO, and then again, both delayed sternal closures. Let's move on to the next slide.
Okay, I figured out what was happening. All right.
Okay.
It was me, not you.
And then just to review, we're counting that because the prior procedure was ECMO cannulation. The op type would have been ECMO, and the incision here is sternotomy again because we've reopened the chest. It's not other. Next slide.
All right.
Okay. This patient undergoes a heart transplant on January 1st. In November, the patient had received a VAD implant on CPB and the chest was left open. Later, the patient has a VAD procedure again on CPB and the chest is closed a few days later. For the January 1st operation, again, this is new rules. How many prior cardiac operations has this patient undergone?
There we go. Sorry about that other question, guys. We got a little bit of variety here.
Okay, it looks like it's tapered enough. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, so for this patient, for their heart transplant on January 1st, we're going to count the VAD on CPB only because it was a VAD implant on CPB and the chest was left open, so that was a sternotomy.
Yeah, looks like the majority put answered 2 for that one. 2 and then 3. Yes.
Oh, I don't remember what my next slide is. It probably is the explanation. If you want to click over, we can. Okay, so for prior cardiac operations, again, this is not prior CPB, this is prior cardiac operations. The prior procedure was a VAD implant. So they had one VAD implant, the op type was VAD with CPB, and the incision type there was sternotomy. So it's just the one. Next slide. VAD implant, op type CPB, I just saw this, incision type sternotomy does count. Next slide. VAD procedure, op type CPB, but the incision type was other because the chest was already open, does not count. And then the delayed sternal closure is op type VAD without CPB, incision type other does not count. Next slide. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Same patient undergoes a heart transplant on January 1st. In November, they had their VAD implant on CPB. They later had a VAD procedure on CPB, and then the chest was closed. So for the January operation, you know what? We can go through this, but I messed up the question. Let's talk about it though. Leanne, I closed my poll, so if you see it slowing down and you want to turn it
Yep.
off, you can the answer slide.
Yeah, we've still got some coming in where it looks like it started. So I'm going to end the poll, Leslie, and share the results so you can see them.
Okay, so well, we're kind of split between 1 and 2. The correct answer here is 2. And that is because in November, they had the VAD implant with CPB and the VAD procedure with CPB. Next slide. So for counting prior CPB cardiac operations, it's just VAD with CPB. It does not matter the incision type. So this is a little bit of a switch from what we had talked. You can go ahead to the next one. Sorry, Leanne.
That's all right. That's all right.
The VAD implant with CPB, that counts. The VAD procedure with CPB, that counts. But the delayed sternal closure without CPB does not count. So this is the one I feel from reviewing these things is a little trickier. Just to remember that those CPB counts, we're literally counting which operations are VAD with CPB and forgetting the incision type for that count. Next slide. Okay, new patient. This patient is a 20-year-old They come in on January 5th with conduit failure. Their H&P states prior history of ECMO cannulation and valve replacement with homograft. How many prior cardiac CT operations has the patient undergone?
Looks like, yeah,
Great. So
great. Yep.
still coming in, great. Okay, so most people have chosen 1, and 1 is the correct answer. And this is because we do not know how the patient was cannulated to ECMO, or nor do we know when they were cannulated to ECMO. So again, going back to one of the slides Chastity shared, we need to have documentation about that ECMO cannulation. Don't just assume when you're collecting this data. Next slide. Okay, just another review. So in this case, the prior ECMO cannulation would have had to have been documented as op type ECMO, or you would have known, and then incision type would have had to be anything but other. Next slide. Okay, to summarize, prior operations counts. This change begins January 1st. So don't go back and abstract any cases right now. No surgeries that occur through December 31st. This is beginning January 1. Anytime you have a question, please submit an FAQ so that we can see the case scenario, we can see what you're seeing or what information you're getting, and we can review. Make sure you find documentation of the incision type. Don't just assume. Also, do not rely on any local or vendor design calculations, as that may have been based on the prior definition. I don't know any of the details on what you have locally or with your vendors. And then just what I've done at my own hospital is just given my team a heads up, because we do talk about this in some of our reports, that this will be changing January 1st forward. And then the next slide. Oops, let me see again. Okay, this is just here as a summary in case anyone wants to print this. I have this just so I can reference it starting in January. It's just an extra slide. There's nothing new that we didn't already talk about. It's just in case you guys want a little snippet, if you want to print this off or take a screenshot just to keep for the future. And then I think that wraps up our stuff, and we can move on to some questions once you review, Leanne.
Yep. We'll go ahead and hop into your questions. I know Amy's got her hand raised, and she has the first question here. So let's go ahead and hop over to Amy's question. Amy, I'm gonna, oh, I think your hand was raised, but no, it's not raised. Let's see here. Chas and Leslie, let's see. First, I want to say thank you for covering this topic and also for making this change. It's been a long been a point of confusion and inconsistency in data capture at our center. Just to clarify, in the current version, 341, we now can capture procedures that occurred during the current hospitalization and the prior op count. I believe in 341, we were only supposed to include procedures that occurred in prior admissions, which admittedly our center was not doing.
So the current version is 623.2.
Oh, sorry,
Not,
yes. Sorry.
Yeah, well, no, that's what her question
Sorry.
says. The current version is, but it actually is. In the current version, we capture procedures that occurred during the current hospitalization in 341. So we clarified the 341 definition years ago to say that it's all the prior ops, not just during a prior admission. But if your center hasn't been doing this consistently, that's okay. Start doing it consistently now with these new definitions and moving forward.
Okay.
Agreed.
For the Norwood case scenario, why does the second delayed sternal count? I thought if chest was closed after ECMO cannulation, op type was ECMO, and this would not count.
Okay, that's a good question, and this is a point of confusion for a lot of people. So that patient was already off ECMO, and it was following an index operation. So it's a no CPV cardiovascular delayed sternal closure. If the patient was only admitted for ECMO, only here for an ECMO cannulation, and that's all we did, then you are correct that you would keep it as op type ECMO for that delayed sternal closure. But if they have another index operation, they've had their chest opened and closed, it follows the same rules as any other delayed sternal closure, and it's an op type, no CPB cardiovascular.
All right, Amy, did you want me to show that case scenario again? I'm sorry. For the Norwood, is that what you're referring to? Yes, okay, hold on. Which case was it?
So,
Was it 2, 3?
I think it's first.
Oh, the first one, okay. Sorry, watch the Forgive the Anger Scrolling, guys.
Right.
There you go.
So this patient is here, they have a Norwood, we close the chest, so Norwood is CPB. Sorry, Norwood, CPB, cardiovascular, planned delayed sternal closure, close the chest again, no CPB cardiovascular. We reopen the chest, we go on ECMO, ECMO cannulation, ECMO, decannulate, ECMO, chest is closed again, no CPB cardiovascular.
Okay. Very confusing that the delayed sternal closures that are op type no CBB cardiovascular count as prior ops, but delayed sternal closures that are VAD without CPB do not.
Yes, it is very confusing. That is why we're going through this. There's different criteria for prior cardiac ops versus prior CPB ops.
Leslie, if I can say something real quick. Amy, this is Ram. I agree. There is some confusion in the way this is being handled right now, Amy, and it is not because we intend to make it confusing. It's because the way the data collection form is set up, we want to try and make it as fair as possible to everyone that is putting cases in. And so right now, a VAD without CPB will not qualify as prior cardiac op for anything, right? You need it to be a different op type for you to get prior operative credit. We're taking the first step in what I think is the right direction by now giving prior op credit for VADs that are done with a sternotomy. Now, in the next iteration of the evolution of the data collection form, we need to find a way to establish parity across the border, whereby your delayed sternal closure will count as a prior op, regardless of whether it followed a Norwood or whether it followed a VAD CPB or VAD without CPB. That's the next iteration. Right now, it can't count. It's unfortunate, but I don't have a better solution rather than saying every VAD without CPB should count. And if we go down that direction, think about what can happen. A percutaneous groin impella would get the same prior operative credit as a BiVAD Berlin, for example. And you and I and everybody will agree that they shouldn't be the same. So I think the data collection form is trying to keep up with the speed with which our field is progressing, and therefore will eventually catch up. Right now, we're still a little bit behind. Now, the one other thing I will add is adding these numbers of prior cardiothoracic operations and the priors on pump up, on CPB operations are crucial. They are important for us to figure out how they matter in the risk model. But just to make it clear, currently the risk model utilizes prior operations as a yes-no variable. So the numbers, while they're important as we refine the risk model, currently a redo operation is a redo operation for the sake of the risk model. So I say that not to minimize the importance of putting the correct data in, but I think it's important to allay the fear that moving forward, this is not going to adversely impact your risk-adjusted outcomes. It is going to help us appropriately risk stratify patients and improve the risk model moving forward. So I recognize the confusion. It is concerning, but it's a step in the correct direction.
Thank you, Ram.
Looking at some of the other questions, it goes back to what Leslie just said about delayed sternal closures. Delayed sternal closures, by and large, are a no CPB cardiovascular operation. If the only procedure ever done during your hospitalization is VAD or ECMO, and then you do a delayed sternal closure, that's where the op type can be VAD or ECMO respectively. But otherwise, delayed sternal closures are no CPB cardiovascular cases. So it looks like we've gotten a lot of questions about that. So even if, let's say you had your index operation and then you were cannulated to ECMO, we decannulated you from ECMO, and now we close your sternum, that's a no CPB cardiovascular case. It is not an ECMO case. It would only have been an ECMO op type if there was never that index operation that occurred. So you were a primary ECMO case only. Then your delayed sternal closure can be ECMO. But otherwise, after following an index operation during the same episode of care, a delayed sternal closure is always op type, no CPB cardiovascular. So hopefully that'll answer maybe 10 of these questions.
Okay.
I can, that's very well said, Chas. I will proceed. There are a few other delayed sternal closure questions that I'll continue to answer. Delayed sternal closure has been and continues to be a touchy point within the task force. I just want to be completely honest. There's an excellent question that's asked, I think. Liz, you have the question, Liz Serrano. Why is DSC used in prior count if the chest is already open? Again, it's one of those things. If you poll the surgeons across the country, half of them will say that the risk of closing the sternum a few days after it was left open is higher than the risk of closing it in the operating room. And therefore, if a patient needed that, they should get additional recognition for the fact that the sternum was left open for a short period of time. That's sort of the medical explanation. The logistic explanation is similar to the VAD explanation I gave. We want to stay standard and say, look, every no CPP cardiovascular case should get credit as a prior operation. Then we have to say, yeah, but not if it's a delayed sternal closure, or yeah, but not if it is this. It just adds a level of complexity and increased confusion to the data managers. As you know, we're committed to reduce confusion. We're committed to reduce the data burden. So we're trying to make logistic decisions that seem to balance the data burden and the science to the best extent possible. There's always going to be orphan fields like these that may not immediately make sense. I want to assure you that we think about this very deeply. We don't want to make changes that will result in more questions than what we're trying to answer. So we recognize a little vagaries here and there, but please understand that we're doing everything we can to try and minimize these moving forward.
Liz, to look at your specific question, we're told to put in the other incision type for a delayed sternal closure. That is correct because the sternum is already open, so your incision type is other. So you're asking, why do we count this in the prior count if the chest is already open? We're only doing incision type rules for VAD and ECMO cases. So for the other op types, those rules don't come into play. So they would count in the prior procedure count.
Thank you, Chas. All right, feel free to scan the questions, Chas, Leslie, read out the question from Megan. Have you guys answered?
I don't believe so. A patient had a NOR with temporary chest closure, followed by a delayed sternal closure on post-op day 4. Does this count as 1 or 2 prior operations for this patient in the future? So the temporary chest closure is during the Norwood, you're saying? Okay. I was like, wait, 3. 2, because they have a delayed sternal closure and the Norwood.
Yep. Importantly, for what you would already count, it stays the same. Prior cardiac operations, a CPB cardiovascular and no CPB cardiovascular. That is the same. The addition is when the procedure is VAD implantation or ECMO cannulation, when op type is VAD or ECMO and incision type is anything but other, respectively.
Perfect. All right. Scrolling through. Questions related to the current conversation. Alrighty.
Marina's question says, we are counting all priors that meet criteria regardless of when they occurred. It doesn't matter if they occurred in a prior admission or the current admission. Is that correct? You are absolutely correct, Marina.
All right, Jocelyn's we tackled. Let's see here. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to touch on the questions that are related to the current op type conversation. I'll get to the other questions once we answer these. All righty. Dr. Subramanian, did you want to tackle Kathy's or respond to Kathy's comment there?
Sure. Kathy's comment is the rules around sternal closure change seem excessive. Kathy, I'm happy to indulge in a conversation with you. I'm not sure I fully understand what the change rules you're describing. You have my email. If not, Leanne does. Please send me what you feel is excessive. We will absolutely look at it and discuss it within the task force. I would hate for anything to be fear-based abstraction. The intent of an audit is never to hammer anyone. So I hope you don't feel that way. The idea of the database is absolutely singularly and exclusively to serve as a performance and quality improvement tool that we can all use. So at the end of the day, the children we care for perform better. That's the only goal. That is going to take effort. It's going to take resources, both in terms of, people, effort, evaluation, volunteer time, cost. It's going to take it. I recognize that it comes with effort. I totally do. And I cannot thank you all enough for what you do, but I hate for a situation where this feels onerous, burdensome, or is being undertaken because of some fear. So I am fully available to discuss any rule change that seem excessive and anything that we can meaningfully address and reduce the data burden. I remain committed to doing it expeditiously.
Okay, thank you so much, Ram. And if you need it, Kathy, if you need to reach out to me directly, feel free to do so. Our next question from Angie: if a patient has Norwood and leaves the OR on ECMO and a washout is done and the patient is still on ECMO, would the washout be op type cardiovascular or ECMO?
Yep, great question, Angie. So that's still op type ECMO.
Correct. Next question from Sam: with this change, by including the incision type with the VAD with CPB op type, you could end up with a patient having more prior CPB cardiac operations than they have prior cardiac operations, which doesn't make sense. Why not just include all VAD with CPB ops to the number of prior cardiac operations?
Yeah, Sam, you are right, but I can't answer why.
I'm happy to take that. So Sam, that's an excellent question. The reason for that is because there are some people who do VAD with cardiopulmonary bypass support differently. Our goal here is to make sure that people get credit for true cardiac operations only. The bottom line here is there are some people that go on the groin on cardiopulmonary bypass, but do minimally invasive separate incisions to get on VAD and so forth. The iterations are so many, and therefore we're trying to approach it in a stepwise fashion. So you're right, we'll probably go through a phase where there'll be more CPB than more just prior operations. While that seems counterintuitive, one of the explanations could be the example that I provided. So we will keep constantly readdressing this. If there is a mechanism for us in a future DCF upgrade to set up a separate mode where we can eliminate all of this, I think we will do it to reduce the data burden and the confusion. But we're going to have to transition through a phase where we see what you're noticing.
Thank you, Ron. Alrighty. Okay. We've got a couple other questions. I see several questions coming in regarding the surgeon level reports that STS has sent out. I am responding to, if you could please submit those questions regarding the surgeon level reports to Jane Hahn directly. She is handling the surgeon level reporting and responding to questions related to those reports. I'm going to put her email into the chat. She is the best to answer those questions. So if you could just reach out to her directly, and Jane would be happy to address any of those questions related to the surgeon level reports that are now being produced. Okay, and we have two questions from Beth. So let's go up to her first question. Notice in this new version, some post-op events are listed as major morbidity events. Is there a comprehensive list somewhere on the website that identifies these specific morbidity events? Also, how do these major morbidity events impact the analysis in comparison to all the post-op events that also get coded?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, there is not a list on the website just specifically listing the events that follow that major timeline. You can, this has come in as an FAQ a couple times, and our best advice right now is to search in the training manual for anything that follows the major event timeline to get all of the ones that you would be collecting through episode of care, or the major event timeline. But as far as analysis goes, they're not handled differently other than the fact that they do follow a different timeline.
And to tack on to what Leslie said, as far as having a separate list, we don't want to put multiple documents out there with different lists because of version control. And so making sure everything remains updated or clarified is very difficult. So we have the training manual that lists all of the events, and that's where you'll find the information.
Perfect, thank you. Beth, if you could just email me directly, direct data entry customers, does this data download report have the ability to reflect the post-op events that are considered major post-operative events? I don't think so. If you could just shoot me an email directly, Beth. I'm honestly, I'm not that familiar with the direct data entry portion and the download, but if you could just shoot me an email and I'll get more information for you. Let's see. From Aaliyah, I think that's how you pronounce your name. Let's see. I think it would be helpful to LA concerns about the numerous changes. If it was clear how the algorithm for audits addresses changes, for example, whether the algorithms are updated to incorporate specific timelines when changes are made. This is important for audits.
I'm happy to take that question.
Yes.
The short answer is yes. The audit variables are audited based on current database rules only, and they are applied to cases that are being audited based on the rules that were available when those cases were coded. So for example, if we were to audit, I'm not going to say it's happening now, but let's say when version 6.23 is already available, we audit a case that was entered into the DCF version 3.41, the data managers in the center and the surgeons will only be accountable for the fields that were in version 3.41. It's the same way. So whenever changes are made, the changes are contemporary. That's one of the reasons the STS has uniformly said that in all databases, changes will be implemented prospectively. We're not going to make you go back and change them. And the audit will be for contemporary rules as applicable to when the auditing case was entered into the database, and that only. The auditors know this. They are widely aware of this policy. We assure you that you can hold us accountable, that the audit will be performed only with contemporary rules for when the case was entered.
Perfect. Thank you, Ram. Okay. Let me get back to the questions. Thank you. Let's see. So more information about the surgeon level report. So just really quickly, for those of you, there was an email sent out. I believe it was to the surgeons directly. Yes, it was to the surgeons directly. And STS is now releasing surgeon level reports for participating surgeons. And right now these reports are NPI level case volume reports. So for example, for congenital, the surgeon level report, volume level report includes benchmark operations by year, operations by stat category and year, and operations by op type and year. So that's what's included in this surgeon level volume report right now. They are generated following the completion of each database harvest, and are limited to surgery dates beginning January 1, 2008. The first report will include cases up through June 30th of 2023. Again, this is a surgeon level report. Your surgeon must consign and submit a consent form to receive this report. These reports are sent directly to the surgeon. They are not sent to the primary data and file contact. The surgeon can share these reports, his or her specific report, with their data manager, but these are sent directly to the surgeon. Surgeon must consent, and you have to check with your surgeon. So Nancy, how do we know if they signed a consent? You would have to check with your surgeon. You would just have to ask them directly if they consented, if they signed a consent to receive the surgeon level report. Dookie. And again, for any questions related to the surgeon level reports, if you could just email Jane Hahn directly, and I did put her email into the chat. The link to the consent, Nancy, was sent along with the communication that was sent to the surgeon. So again, this is something that your surgeon must elect into directly. I do not have the communication, Amy. It was sent directly from our marketing and database team. If you could, again, just reach out to Jane Hahn directly, and she could assist you with any of these questions related to the surgeon level report. But no, these are not available in IQVIA at this time. This is a report that is sent directly to the surgeon from STS.
I can just add one quick thing to it.
Yes.
A deliberate decision was made to keep this conversation between the STS and the surgeons because of obvious privacy concerns and because of different relationships between the surgeons and the participants and so forth. Therefore, there was a very, very intentional decision between the STS and the surgeons to keep that line of communication open. So Leanne's giving you the right advice. Please reach out to Jane. The other way you could do it is you could talk to the surgeon of record, and if they want to share their data, well, that's an individual preference that the surgeon is going to have to make. The STS and its contracting disallows individual level data being shared more publicly. Therefore, we have restricted conversations between the STS to be with the surgeons and the surgeons individually only.
Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. And Leah just said, thank you. They had just had an audit, so they wanted to make that information available to others. And so thank you for confirming, Dr. Subramanian.
What a perfect comment from Amy, right? You're right, Amy. Yeah. We almost never read these emails. So please remind your surgeon that this came in the email. If your surgeon didn't get it, Jane will happily send it back, and maybe this time your surgeon will read it. But being one of those surgeons, I can tell you, I don't read these types of emails either.
Yes. So, and to Liz, to the answer to your question, no, the surgeon must complete the form themselves. So they have to consent directly.
Yeah, if we surgeons could get help to do all these kinds of things, We would be so much more efficient. But you know, incompetence is my middle name. I'm just happy it's not my first name, so I'm good.
So, but yeah, just a reminder. So again, for the congenital volume-based surgeon level report, again, it does right now. The first iteration of this report it includes benchmark operations by year, operations by stat category in year, and operations by op type in year. So this is the first iteration of this report. So I believe there are, hopes to expand it in the future moving forward, but this is the first iteration of this surgeon level report. All right. Well, we are just about at the hour. I don't see any additional questions coming in. But again, as Dr. Subramanian said, please reach out to your surgeon directly to see if they've heard about this surgeon level report that's now available. If not, please have them contact Jane Hahn directly, and Jane can assist with getting more information to them about the surgeon level report that is now available. Chastity and Leslie, Dr. Subramanian, thank you so much for today. I know this was a very confusing topic, and I'm sure we'll be continuing to provide education on this. So we look forward to doing that as we finish out this year and start the new year. Speaking of the remainder of this year and the new year, please note that our monthly webinar for December the 19th is going to be canceled. We have our Hot Topics webinar scheduled on the 5th, but we are quickly moving into the Christmas and holiday season, New Year, starting after Hot Topics. So schedules are just simply not allowing for that 19th webinar to happen. So we will have our Hot Topics on December the 5th. We look forward to having all of you join us. And then we will resume with our webinars at the start of the year. So thank you everyone for joining today. Dr. Subramanian, Chas, Leslie, Emily, Addie, Melinda, thanks everyone for joining. And I hope you guys have a great holiday.